Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of something we're going to talk about today, which is very, very close to my heart because in my professional career, I've been working with mobile apps for about 15 plus years for very large enterprises, a lot of digital content, etc. And then I discovered, the person right in front of you, Neil, and what they do as a company. And it just, mind blowing in so many different levels. So the best way to go and peek into his mind was to invite him, and he gladly accepted. So Neil, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Shweet, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, excited for our conversation.
Great, perfect. So let's kick it off, Neil. I like just to start you introducing yourself, a little bit about what you guys do at Typecart. I know really cool stuff, but just dumb it down for me, please.
Sure. So I'm a team lead over here at the enterprise team at Tapcart. Our focus is helping brands really get their retention strategy in line and build a sustainable strategy around retention and LTV, leveraging a mobile app. And so when you think about today's day and age, retention is a larger focus than it's ever been. Being able to extract more value out of each customer relationship is higher priority than it's historically been in the past, and largely driven by the higher customer acquisition cost. So when a customer does come into the funnel, it makes it that much more important to make the most of that customer when they do come in. And so when you think about where Tapcart fits into that, puzzle, it's kind of like a retention flywheel. We solve one of the areas of, driving increased, sessions to a brand from each user by living on the device home screen, and then also increase the frequency of purchases and whatnot. So the goal is to maximize LTV, and we do that in a very plug and play fashion for brands where it historically was a big lift. Now we've made it a next to nothing lift in order to achieve that.
Yeah, and I keep on looking at the case studies and the numbers, and they're just amazing, Neil. Right? Coming from the whole inertia of spending that much money to get an app installed on your device, and I have burned millions of dollars working with Manhattan-based New York agencies, right? That when we got so many installs, and in 6 months, like nobody uses it, right? The uninstalls are insanely high.
Sure.
Trying to do what you guys are doing in this space is really commendable, and especially for how you started. So, how has for you the personal journey to e-commerce and to Tapcart been? I'd like a little peek on your background, please.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've worked in the mobile app space for about 5 years now. I came from I've been in the low code, no code mobile app space, but
Mhm.
one thing I loved more than anything was the e-commerce merchant. I loved working with Shopify merchants as a part of those projects, and decided to make that a full-time endeavor here, well, in working with Tapcart. When you think of the Shopify merchant, they are the grittiest of the bunch. They're the hardest working of the bunch. They're willing to sacrifice anything and everything in order to achieve that goal. And I admire that about them. And that's why I enjoy surrounding myself with them. And
Yeah.
so when you think about, the challenges that they're facing is that, e-commerce brands are typically, built on the backs of like two, three, maybe a fourth human on that marketing effort. And
Yeah.
that means that they're wearing many hats, they're juggling a lot of things, and therefore they have to be really choosy with what channels they choose to pursue, so that they're not spread too thin with that smaller team. When you think historically of the lift, what you just mentioned earlier about like having you know spending a lot of money and resources and time to develop an app only to find that maybe there was an uninstall rate or lack of excitement after a certain period of time. You're absolutely right. That's something that continually changes in terms of adapting to the consumer. The consumer is changing almost every quarter, and therefore the strategy with pursuing an app also changes with that, as with any other marketing strategy, right? So where Tapcart kind of did things different was we took that agency model and felt like just understood that it's a completely broken system. In other words, when you hire an agency to build something or developer to build something, you're hiring them to do exactly that. Build
Yeah.
me this, and many times you don't know exactly what it is you want. You want to be able to beta test. You want to be able to A/B test. You want to be able to change things on the fly and adapt, because as we know, when we build something, it never ends up in that same final
Absolutely.
as a
Always.
final product in that same version. And so I think that's where we kind of took that model, turned it upside down. There are no upfront costs associated, and therefore you can get an app live in under 2 weeks, where historically it could take a year plus to do so, right? And that's where we made it a lot easier for Shopify brands on Shopify to launch an app, because it just the lift required to get it off the ground is next to nothing, and they can prove the ROI or prove the value very early in that cycle, as opposed to waiting a long time.
It is phenomenal, and something that I really appreciate what you guys have done, and we failed miserably on it, and admitting it very very honestly here is when we started building Koi, we were like, typical startup will also do websites, and we'll also do mobile apps, and we'll also do this, etc.
Sure.
Because a lot of people, when we spoke to, they're like, if you want to focus on one sector, on one platform, it's going to be too small for you, right? But you guys started off saying, let me just do this for Shopify, and then kind of going outside, because now I believe that it's a solution that can work with other platforms as well. That laser sharp focused, it's something which is really commendable. Where does that come from, in the entire ecosystem that you guys fit in?
You're absolutely right. I think we operate under the mantra that the riches are in the niches, right? So when you think about a go-to-market strategy for any type of SaaS tool, or let's talk about the Shopify ecosystem, it can be the conventional thought would be to let's tackle as many channels and tools and become as valuable, because maybe there may be some customers over here that might get drawn in from this tool and get exposure to the rest, and vice versa with other tools. That strategy can most certainly work. It's just a lot harder. And so we're very much a believer of seeing, instead of being a jack of all trades, let's be an expert of one. And that's where we did that here. So when you think of building a mobile app solution, we focused, number one, on app building alone, as opposed to other retention channels, right?
Right.
You see a lot of other players focusing on all the various channels,
Omnichannel
and
stack,
while
yeah.
that is heroic in its own right, it's heroic, right? And from our perspective, we just believe in doing one thing and doing it really, really well.
Yeah.
And then number two, we currently focus exclusively on the Shopify ecosystem, and are now in the process of building for expanding beyond the Shopify
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that comes with its own challenges. It
Yeah, of
requires its
course.
own go-to-market strategy, but it's so much easier to go to market when you have a proven strategy with one ecosystem, right? And that's, I think, what's been started here. We've proven this. Now we're powering apps for over 3,000 brands on Shopify.
Nice.
We have a proven system. We have and by virtue of the success we've had, Shopify is now one of Tapcart's largest stakeholders. They sit on our board of directors. They're an investor in Tapcart, so as a part of our Series B, and a lot of that has been due to the fact that we've solved this very niche category of retention for brands.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's super. And um, again, this is the part of the community that I really like, right? We have those really nice examples and case studies, not just of the D2C brands we're talking about, but the companies who are trying to create niche offering and solve a particular problem. And we are facing that problem again as a brand today, that when we go and try to tell people that, hey, we have this AI that understands your visitor in real time, right? So we use 40 plus micro behaviors to kind of understand
Yeah,
what's their intent, low, medium, high, and then you engage with them accordingly, rather than segmenting or doing whatever.
which is
And
based on more historical data.
which is exactly, and then that comes with the operational, and if somebody's doing RFM, somebody's doing something else, whatever, right? and
Hmm.
and with the reducing attention span, the number of options I have, the best time to convert somebody is on the real estate right then and there. Everything
Sure.
else works, abandoned carts and emails and WhatsApps, etc., but that's the real time thing is what they want. So uh, and we are in that curse of that time at the moment when we tell them real time intent, and they're like, what the heck are you talking about, kind of thing, right? But that's where, did you guys ever had that feeling that mobile apps for Shopify, hey, I don't need it, the online store is good enough?
Sure. I mean, we hear that with almost every conversation we have, right?
Okay.
The question is, I have a beautiful website, a mobile website. It's responsive on mobile. It looks nice on mobile.
Yeah.
Why do I even need an app, right?
Yeah.
And it really comes down to if any brand right now were to pull up their Shopify analytics, and this is a challenge for anyone that's listening here, right?
Yeah.
Pull up your Shopify or your Google Analytics. Pull it up over the whole last year.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at the number of web sessions you had, right? From there, take a look at the number of unique visitors those sessions were made up from, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to take the total sessions divided by the number of visitors, I'm willing to bet that number is right around 1.2, 1.3. In other words, the average visitor is visiting the brand 1.2 times per month. And it will rarely fall outside of that range. I challenge anybody to
Yeah.
take a
Yeah.
look at that with their own data, right? So now the question is 1.2 times, and of those 1.2 times, only 3% of them are converting, right? So the challenge is like, how can we bring the user back for more sessions?
Yeah.
And that's the value of what an app is going to bring. It's essentially saying, hey, invite that user, give them some kind of value add, encouragement, something that they can specifically say, I can gain this benefit from downloading the app. Once you've downloaded the app, now that user is going to be visiting that brand 4, 5, 10 times per month, simply as a function of living directly on the device home screen
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
weaving push notifications into the mix, as opposed to right now they're living in a browser. They're
Yeah.
living in an email inbox that eventually goes to the bottom, a
Yeah.
text message thread that eventually gets pushed down. So this is where you talk about the real estate play of
Yeah.
what an app is, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's once they understand that, they're able to say, wow, like if my goal is to drive those web sessions, how am I doing it right now? And brands are spending money on retargeting to do that. They're sending money, they're spending money on text messages to bring that customer back. Whereas when you think about the app, it doesn't cost anything to bring that customer back. And
Mm.
therefore, now brands are focused on the app as a revenue efficiency tool. In other words, how do I do more with less? How do I bring that customer back while spending less in that process and therefore making it a higher margin customer, a more profitable customer? And that's the focus of an app. It's the margin efficiency that comes with more frequent sessions that are all brought back in free fashion.
No, I love the whole thought process of revenue efficiency channel, right? Because that's what they can derive out of it. And of course, most of them would know this, but mobile app can gather far more amount of data than the web browser can, right? And then you can use that back into multiple ways the way you like it. And like it or hate it, personalization is a thing. Customers would want to be shown something that they would like, more susceptible to buy, etc. And at the end, for me, I define personalization as, it's whatever tech you use, but that helps me find whatever I was looking for faster. That reduction in time, reduction in clicks, or maybe I didn't know I needed it, but a social proof comes along, and I think might as well give it a try. So that's amazing. Um, let's go back. So you have 3,000 plus brands, which is a significant number. A lot of case studies, a lot of numbers, um, and some part of it would have also come during the COVID time, right? When the numbers were spiking high, and it was rosy for this side of the fence, I would say. But are you seeing a trend that the brands are kind of complaining now? My traffic's reduced, my AOVs have reduced, my sales have reduced, and are you witnessing that from an app perspective as well?
Great question. So, we were in the go-go days of COVID era where,
Yeah,
everything D2C and e-commerce was taking off, and then also fueled by the stimulus checks that were and entering, consumers' pockets. All of
yeah,
that gave the D2C universe a feeling of this could be forever. This is what it's going to be like forever, which was completely a false notion and arguably representative of a bubble, right? And so when you think about the grounding pattern that has taken place, where we've entered kind of this period of new normal, it feels recessionary in the D2C space. The reality is it's not recessionary. It's actually just a reversion to the mean. It's a reverting back to what a historical norm would be from a growth perspective, which means it's a grind. It requires, being more creative. It requires focusing on revenue efficiency and profits. Customer acquisition is a night and day cost than what it was during those days pre iOS 14. So, like all of these factors are new realities that brands have to deal with. So now the question is, for brands that emerged during that era, the go-go days, as you mentioned, um, are brands seeing a drop as a whole since then? Absolutely. We see it across the board. However, if you take a look at a brand that does have an app, let's equate that same analogy to Black Friday. Okay.
Okay.
So right
Okay.
now, 99% of brands have the same trend that happens with Black Friday. And we'll use that same analogy applying to COVID. Black Friday, huge peak in traffic.
Okay.
People buy. Conversion rates are higher. Customers are higher intent. Then come January, February, March, everything goes to
Yeah.
crickets and zero, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that so many brands are living, they fail to capitalize on this peak traffic. They're focused on just that one single purchase,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas they fail to get that customer into a retention funnel successfully to drive future repeat engagement through the new year, right?
Indeed.
And that's where, if you think about the Black Friday, this is a conundrum that comes every single year. Now you look at the COVID era, that was just a longer, protracted version of this peak period in volume. That post this peak period, brands are still struggling unless they have that customer captured into channels that maximize LTV, right? And so that's where when you look at brands that do have a mobile app, well, guess what? They see the repeat purchases coming through in the new year, post Black Friday, even after that peak period. Why? You're just living where their eyes are. There's a subconscious bias
Yeah.
that takes place that they're not thinking about that brand. They're not thinking about shopping. They're not thinking about buying a new t-shirt, but they are staring at their mobile device for 6.5 hours a day, scrolling left and right across that brand's icon. And that's what's going to promote so many more clicks into the brand. So now fast forward and you apply that same analogy to post-COVID era, that same thing. Brands that have powerful retention channels in place are still seeing growth, right? It's just that 9 out of 10 don't have those channels in place. And hence you're seeing this kind of protracted retraction,
That's
right?
really insightful, and I never thought the numbers would be like that. But I love your analogy of Black Friday, and yes, you're right. It was an extended Black Friday season where I've spoken to a lot of brands in the UK, and uh, I've heard insane stories of how new warehouses were created overnight, and the shipping of cost to, and the price of what the goods were sold was like whatever X multiples. But most of them are complaining now because of the whole traffic scenario. But yeah, that's so interesting. Moving on, Neil, I want to get your sense on the whole space that we are in is extremely competitive. Okay. Last week, I subscribed to a few newsletters, and I'm sure you do as well. The last week, there were like 74 new apps released on the Shopify App Store. Today, I got an email saying 68 apps released. So it's like insane. And I spoke to somebody last week. He said we launched our app in 2020, and that time used to be one or five or something like that, right? So even in the past 2 years, this number's gone insanely high, and the customer is more picky, more choosy, and far more demanding. And in our space, customer success is so important. You strive every day to show value. How do you guys kind of enforce this at your product level, at the organization level, just to understand that, hey, every day I need to show conversions, I need to show revenue? What's the mantra behind?
You're absolutely right. Like, building an app of any kind in the Shopify ecosystem, regardless of what category or problem you're solving, it becoming an increasingly crowded space. And so there's a couple of dynamics to keep in mind. First, understand that competition will always come into play. There will always be those that are trying to copy or mimic your solution, right? Because you'll notice that a lot of Shopify apps all, solve the same thing. So the question is, which one do you choose?
Yeah.
And the reality is, copycats are an incredibly great form of flattery.
Yeah.
And it's an indication, should be validation that you're doing something right and you're pursuing, going down the right path. Now, the question is, how do you differentiate yourself as a SaaS solution that is solving this problem when there's so many more entrants into the space that are coming day after day? And that really comes down to the experience and value you're giving to your end merchant. I'll use an example here of something we noticed and we had to dramatically change about 3 years ago, and pivoting kind of in the strategy, right? Over 3 years ago, we marketed ourselves more as an off-the-shelf solution that allows you to build your own app in a fraction of the cost and time, get it live in 2 weeks, just like it is now, right?
Yeah.
Um, but here's the challenge: build your own app. What does that mean? That
Yeah.
means the merchant has to devote time. That
Yeah.
means the merchant has to devote energy, resources, an employee on their team.
And
And as I
mind
mentioned
share.
at
Yeah.
the top of our conversation, it these brands are built on the backs of 2 or 3 humans. So there's
Yeah.
only so much bandwidth that they have. So they have to be very selective. So one of the things we noticed a little over 3 years ago was, yes, our solution's so easy. And yes, when it's employed, it works virtually overnight. So why are merchants still facing a challenge
Mm.
in deploying it?
Mm.
And that's because of the bandwidth issue. So we went to go solve it. And now, as a part of the solution, we manage the app too. We build, design, get the app live into the market, generating downloads before the merchant essentially spends any significant dollars. And we are the ongoing manager too. Why? Because the last thing we want to do is take more time bandwidth from our merchant, right? So when you think about now, when a merchant says, I need to leave Tapcart for some reason, well, that means I'm letting go of an extra human too, meaning like
Yeah.
I'm letting go of this valuable resource that was helping me manage my app too. It makes it
Yeah.
very difficult to go to another app solution because there is no other app solution that is the manager too, right?
Yeah. Right.
So,
Yeah.
so how do you make yourself stickier as a SaaS solution? It really comes down to like how instrumental can you be into that strategy, right? So that comes with needing to be a salesperson throughout the entire. We're not just selling at the front end of the
Yeah.
experience. As a SaaS solution, we know that they can technically cancel anytime. So the question is, how can you continue to drive that value? Is being that extension of their team. We are truly an extension of their team. Design changes, home screen changes, Klaviyo flows that they need scheduled. Say the word, we're going to do all of that for them in 6 to 12 hours, right? There are no fees for that, right? No agency model for that, right? Um, and so that was one way we solved. The other part is something we internally call time to value. In other words,
Hmm.
from the moment the merchant decides to launch, what is the speed in which they see a positive ROI? How long does it take?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if that answer is needing to become smaller and smaller as this Shopify ecosystem becomes more crowded, our time to value here at Tapcart is about 9 to 12 days. So from the moment a merchant launches their app, they're going to be ROI positive on the app within 9 to 12 days. Now, that's
Insane.
like crazy fast,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so if they are not seeing an ROI or attribution that's clear as day
Yeah.
for a couple of months, that's where these SaaS solutions are going to see that churn take place, right? So they have to see that value, proven value, in a very short period of time. Shopify merchants, as amazing and gritty as they are, they're also the most impatient group as
Yeah.
well,
Of course.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're always running around KPIs and numbers and margins. So they should be. I love the entire managed services piece with this. What you mentioned, I think it's not just the product, but actually the the technology which has actually been run by somebody who understands the entire thing. So the learning curve is shorter, and I think that all contributes very nicely to the time to value what you're talking about. Yeah. Otherwise, any new merchant signing up to Tapcart, reading the resources which they don't, but because they think they know, but they don't, but whatever, and that's how it is. So yeah, oh, really nice. Again, and a good things to learn for anybody who's building an app or the ecosystem like us. These are some golden nuggets from Neal. I think can be helpful for everybody. Neil, it's been amazing. I think I got a lot of uh, very, very good points from you, from the ecosystem part of it, and how to grow. Um, I have two more questions. One is from where when you joined Tapcart and the way it's heading in terms of growth and everything. Would you say you are 0 to 1? Would you say you're 1 to 10, or you are 10 to 100?
In terms of where we are in the scaling process.
Yeah, in terms of the vision, where you are in the milestone.
Yeah, so we've proven the model, right? So we are past the 1 to 10, a 0 to 1, 1 to 10
Yeah,
phase.
yeah,
We've, raised a significant amount of capital that has, as a result of the solution being validated and the value we bring to merchants. And now we're literally in scale mode. So I would say we're in that kind of accelerating from 10 to 100 at this juncture. One of the things that, when you look at is like what's going to fuel that growth, it's going to come down to how do we deliver increased value to the merchant? How do we become more of an irreplaceable tech stack, piece of the tech stack? How do we continue to focus on revenue efficiency? I think revenue efficiency is going to be the key to any Shopify app ecosystem's growth,
yeah,
right? Because now more than ever, brands are looking at their tech stack with more scrutiny.
yeah,
And two things need to happen. They need to see that revenue lift with fewer dollars spent. And number two, they need to have clear as day attribution onto how that's happening and whether or not that tool is bringing that result. And so I think with those two clearly defined, it's just a function of now adding on the different accelerators in our go-to-market effort in order to do that. That means building out a bigger sales team. That means increasing the size of our merchant success managers and strategy account managers that can support these merchants. But then it also means moving further up market. We already about 70% of our brands that are on our platform are on Shopify Plus. So we already cater
yeah,
to a higher market, not because we only serve that market. We serve all corners of the Shopify market ecosystem. But when you're thinking about scaling, you really want to focus on those where those logos are going to provide a large amount of social proof that further and fuel your cause. And then most importantly, those merchants, those large logos need to see the value because without that, that social proof momentum is lost. I think social proof is a huge part of the Shopify ecosystem. Brands want to say, okay, who else in my space is using your tool and winning? And that in the Shopify ecosystem is just a very pervasive thought process. And that SaaS tools that are looking to scale really need to focus on. So that's kind of the juncture where we're at right now, where we have a proven model. We have thousands of brands that have widely succeeded on Tapcart. Our churn is very well managed in the sense that, like, out of every 100 brands that launches an app, only one decides to discontinue their service with Tapcart.
insane.
So,
Yeah,
like, they see that time to value very quickly. Once you solve that, that's where, adding more logos really helps because I think churn is the largest challenge that the Shopify ecosystem apps
yeah,
face. Oh, let me try this app, and then they discontinue it for
yeah,
3 4 months
yeah.
down the road, right? And that's something we've already solved for. So now the question is, how do we hit the accelerator from here? And that's where we are right now.
Super, very exciting. This is skyrocketing, to say the least, and we're all excited to see the growth because we're all banking on Shopify to grow. I think the whole e-commerce as an industry is taking that reset button at the moment, but eventually with the whole digital transformation, it's all going to go up north. So that's good. My last question, Neil, is something a little more cheekier, and what you have to do is tell us something about yourself that you've never told anybody. So it has to be a fun fact. It has to be something really cool. Uh, you can try to bring in all your humor as possible, and just tell us something which is, yeah, you've not shared with anybody else.
Yes. Well, I spend about 75% of my day sweating. Why? Because I have three really active boys that I'm constantly chasing all day long. Football, basketball, keeping up, avoiding the black eyes amongst each other. So as much I'm so devoted to what I do day in and day out, solving retention for brands. The real reality is I'm spending 70% of my day reapplying my deodorant in order to keep up with my three boys. So, that is the hustle, the grind, but it's also the beauty of having a truly remote first culture.
Indeed.
Something that the COVID era has blessed us and opened our eyes to what is possible, where we can spend more time with our families than ever before, is an amazing thing. So that's where I stand. I'm a sweating father of three boys that loves what I do, admires the people I'm surrounded by, which is the Shopify merchant ecosystem, but also juggling my own juggle and sweating my own sweat with my three little guys that keep me busy.
Perfect. It takes the cake, Neil. That was a really cool one, indeed. It is growing up on my charts already. But again, thank you, Neil. So, guys, anybody listening, if you were able to learn a lot, because I was able to, and you're thinking of mobile app or for your Shopify store, Tapcart is like a default option for me. I've seen the solution as well. It works really nicely. So go and give it a try. Reach out to Neil, and I'm sure he'll hook you up with the right guys. And Neil, looking forward to having you again so that you can give us more insights on how the market is heading and how the Shopify ecosystem is evolving, because you have a good view of that. And thank you again for your time. Really appreciate all the insights that you shared.
Hey, thank you so much, Ritanka. It's a pleasure chatting with you. Really enjoyed our conversation.
All right, talk again soon.